The year is 1908, over 45 years after the Civil War and 640,000 American lives lost over the cause. After Reconstruction era with the passing of laws such as the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which were aimed at giving them equal protection under law, blacks were still discriminated against. Thurgood Marshall was born in this time. Born in Baltimore, Maryland on July 2, 1908, Thurgood Marshall was the grandson of a slave. Attended a segregated public schools. He was the second-born child born to Norma Erica Williams, an elementary school teacher, and William Canfield Marshall, a waiter and country club steward. His family enjoyed a comfortable middle-class existence. Marshall's parents placed a great emphasis on education, encouraging Thurgood and his brother to think and learn. In school, Thurgood was often loud and a disturbance. His grade school principal gave him the usual punishment. Students were sent down to the school basement with a copy of the United States Constitution. They couldn't return to class until a section of the Constitution was memorized. Marshall later said that he knew the whole Constitution before he left school. His father was the first black to serve on a Baltimore grand jury. His father, William Marshall, instilled in him from youth an appreciation for the United States Constitution and the rule of law. After completing high school in 1925, Thurgood followed his brother, William Aubrey Marshall, at his historically black Lincoln University in Chester County, Pennsylvania. His classmates at Lincoln included a distinguished group of future black leaders such as the poet and author Langston Hughes and musician Cab Calloway. In 1930, he applied to the University of Maryland Law School, but was denied admission because he was black. This was an event that was to haunt him and direct his future professional life. Thurgood sought to admission and was accepted at the Howard University Law School that same year and came under the immediate influence of the dynamic new dean, Charles Hamilton Houston, who instilled in all his students the desire to apply the tenets of the Constitution to all Americans.
Hudson had taught his strict views of overturning the 1898 Supreme Court ruling in the Plessy v. Ferguson case, in which a colored shoemaker, Homer Plessy, was jailed for sitting in the white car of the East Louisiana Railroad. Plessy was only 1/8 black and 7/8 white, but he was still considered black and was therefore required to sit in the colored car. The view that Hudson had taught Marshall would leave a lasting impression and have a massive influence on his future. After Marshall completed his studies in law, he joined the NAACP under his former dean, Charlie Hudson. The NAACP is the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People. The main goal of the NAACP was to guarantee political, educational, social, and economic equality for all. This is where Marshall landed his major cases, such as Murray v. Pearson, Morgan v. Virginia, Smith v. Allwright, and Lyons v. Oklahoma. In the Murray v. Pearson case, Donald Murray, a young black man, wanted to become a lawyer and attend the University of Maryland. Raymond Pearson, the president of University of Maryland, said that Murray could obtain separate but equal training in law at the Princess Anne Academy. The University of Maryland was the same school that had rejected Thurgood Marshall. Again, the school refused to allow a black man to become a student, so Mr. Marshall took legal action. He won the case. The young black man was permitted to attend the university's law school, and in later years, the University of Maryland would name its law library after Marshall. In the Morgan v. Virginia case, Irene Morgan stepped onto a crowded Greyhound bus in Gloucester to head to Washington, D.C. After standing for several miles and sitting on the lap of a young black man, Morgan finally took a seat 3 seats from the back of the bus in front of some white passengers' seats. She was removed from the bus when refusing to give up her seat. Then, Marshall took her case with the NAACP team. With a 7-1 ruling, the court found Morgan not guilty. In the Smith v. Allwright case, the NAACP sponsored with Smith, who brought a suit against Texas Democratic Party election officials, alleging that he had been constitutionally denied a primary ballot because of his race. Under the 15th Amendment, citizens had the right to vote in party primaries free of racial discrimination. Smith and Thurgood Marshall won the case. In the Lyons v. Oklahoma case, Lyons had been arrested for murdering his wife and son. Immediately after being arrested, he was interrogated for 2 hours. After he had been in jail for 11 days, Lyons was questioned again. Only this time there was a testimony from Lyons of physical abuse by the police officers at the time of the arrest and first interrogation. This was another case Marshall was head of, and the NAACP had won. Marshall would continue to take many cases in dealing with racial separation. Most of Marshall's clients were poor, and he did not feel the need to charge a lot of money to people who couldn't afford it. Marshall's passion for equality led him to becoming appointed chief attorney for the NAACP, working with 35 cases and winning 32 of them. Marshall's career had taken off. He found himself traveling from one southern courthouse to another as they filed lawsuits for African Americans. Marshall spent much of his time between New York City, the headquarters of NAACP, and Baltimore, where he refused to abandon his clients. Even with his busy schedule, Marshall was able to find 2 wives, Vivian Bury and Cecilia Suyat. He had 2 children with Cecilia in 1955.
Marshall built an impressive record of Supreme Court challenges to state-sponsored discrimination, including the landmark Brown v. Board decision in 1954. In 1951, a class action suit was filed against the Board of Education of the city of Topeka, Kansas. 13 Topeka parents, on behalf of their 20 children, filed a suit called for the school district to reverse its policy of racial segregation. Separate elementary schools were operated by the Topeka Board of Education under an 1879 Kansas law, which permitted districts to maintain separate elementary school facilities for black and white students in 12 communities with populations over 15,000. The named plaintiff, Oliver L. Brown, was a parent. He was convinced to join the lawsuit by Scott, a childhood friend. Brown's daughter, Linda, a 3rd grader, had to walk 6 blocks to her school bus to stop to ride to Monroe Elementary, her segregated black school 1 mile away, while Sumner Elementary, a white school, was 7 blocks from her house. As directed by the NAACP leadership, the parents each attempted to enroll their children in the closest neighborhood school in the fall of 1951. They were each refused enrollment and directed to the segregated schools. The district court ruled in favor of the Board of Education, citing the U.S. Supreme Court precedent set in Plessy v. Ferguson, which had upheld a state law requiring separate but equal segregated facilities for blacks and whites in railway cars. The 3-judge district court panel found that segregation in public education has a damaging effect upon African American children, but denied relief on the ground that the African American and white schools in Topeka were substantially equal with respect to buildings, transportation, and educational qualifications of teachers. President John F. Kennedy appointed Thurgood Marshall to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. In this capacity, he wrote over 150 decisions, including support for the rights of immigrants, limiting government interruption in cases involving illegal search and seizure, double jeopardy, and right to privacy issues. In 1965, President Lyndon Johnson appointed Judge Marshall to the office of U.S. Solicitor General. Before his subsequent nomination to the United States Supreme Court in 1967, Thurgood Marshall won 14 of the 19 cases he argued before the Supreme Court on behalf of the government. Thurgood Marshall represented and won more cases before the United States Supreme Court than any other American. Until his retirement from the highest court in the land, Justice Marshall established a record for supporting the voiceless American. He developed an incredible sensitivity to injustice by the way of the racial discrimination in this country. As an Associate Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall leaves a legacy that expands the early sensitivity to include all of the voiceless Americans,